Everyone, welcome back to this session. And then we'll continue with determining if service organization management has a reasonable bias for its assertion. Service organization like UST going in for a SOC 2 report. Service organization management is responsible for ensuring that their assertion about the description of the system, the design of the controls, and the operating effectiveness of those controls, for example, for a type 2 engagement, is well supported and reasonable. This means that management must assess risks, implement effective controls, and continuously monitor those controls to ensure that they work as intended, right? Which makes sense. But what are some of the key aspects of management responsibility? First, we have to talk on reasonable bias for assertion. Okay. Management must have a solid bias or basis, reasonable basis for assertion. Sorry, not bias. Management must have a solid basis for asserting that the controls are appropriately designed and operating effectively. And what does this entails? Yeah, because each time we want to make that clean, whatever thing we've put, remember you're writing the assertion letter, make sure that it is what it is. We are more transparent here. Talking about risk assessment, first, you want to identify any potential risks to the system and make sure they are also being addressed with effective controls, right? Competency and skill. Management also needs the knowledge and ability to oversee internal controls and any third parties involvement, sub-service organization. So also your internal control. Remember, we also spoke about the knowledge, team members being knowledgeable, and even in a situation where they have to bring a specialist to make sure they understand the effectiveness and design of those controls. We have ongoing monitoring, continuously monitoring the system and controls, especially when interacting with third parties, for example, sub-service organizations or vendors, right? Key aspect of management responsibility, we have continuous monitoring or continuing monitoring controls. That's common. Monitoring is essential to ensure that the controls are working effectively, which makes sense because it's not a one-time fit all. And that's why you say we're talking about SOC type 2 over a period of time to take that time to check to make sure those controls, as a common, those controls has been operational or effective during that period, right? Especially when third parties play a role in the service organization system. It's very, very important. And you too, that's why organization is getting you as third party vendor risk analysts because of comment, making sure, collecting those artifacts, performing due diligence, just keep monitoring your existing vendors and also onboarding new vendors. If third parties are responsible for controls that impact the service organization's performance, it's crucial for management to assess the risks associated with these third parties and also monitor their activities. For example, if UST works with a vendor to manage data security, UST management should regularly check if the vendor is meeting its security standards, right? What are some of the key aspects of management responsibility? First, we talk about types of monitoring activities. Service organizations typically use a mix of ongoing monitoring activities such as internal audit to test third-party controls, reviewing output reports and reconciling them, periodic discussion with third-party personnel to assess performance, site visit to the third party, reviewing SOC 2 reports from sub-service organizations, monitoring users' entity fallback on third-party performance, and if these activities are lacking or insufficient, it can be difficult for management to show they have a reasonable basis for their assertion. So I hope this makes sense. Key aspect of management responsibility. Now let's talk on documentations of monitoring. First, to ensure transparency and accountability, management usually documents its assessment of the system and its monitoring activities. This could include policy manuals, flowcharts, procedural write-ups, or even questionnaires. UST might document its vendor management process in a policy manual to track how it monitors the performance of third-party vendors. You see, that makes sense. Service auditor's role. If a service auditor determines that management's basis for its assertion is not reasonable, or if there's enough evidence to support the assertion, then the auditor should proceed, they have the right to withdraw from the engagement, right? Remember, that's something that we've discussed already. Say, for example, if USC does not have a proper monitoring system in place to assess the effectiveness of controls from its vendors, the service auditor may decide that the engagement cannot continue because remember, US also have service organizations. You also need to, you've onboarded them, right? Before going with them, you've also checked, those are your vendors. So you also need to assess their security controls. And that's exactly what we're saying here. So what have we been discussing so far? Management assertion. UST management must have a solid basis for claiming that its controls are properly designed and effective. Monitoring is key. Continuous monitoring or common of both internal and third-party controls is necessary for management to support its assertions. Okay, especially when you are going with inclusive method. Then the next one, documenting the process. Management should document its monitoring efforts and controls to ensure transparency. And you have service auditor's decision. If the auditor determine that the assertion isn't supported by sufficient evidence, they may not proceed with the engagement, right? And this is very clear. Then we'll talk about assessing the suitability and availability of criteria for a SOC 2 examination. With that, I'll definitely see you guys in the next video. So make sure you like, subscribe, and put whatever comments you might have in the comment section. I'll see you all in the next.